You're most welcome. This is Libe Africa TV. We are just going to talk on the development stages which had already gone before the coming of the Europeans in the continent of Africa. This is Libe Africa channel. It is a channel rich of informations or many informations about African social studies. So today we are just looking on the development which had already reached before the coming of the Europeans, before the coming of the Arabs or Asians in the continent of Africa. So let us use the book of Walter Lodney. Let me quote that before even the British came into relations with our people, we were a developed people, having our own institutions, having our own ideas of government. This is J.E. Casley Harford. He wrote in 1922, African, this Gold Coast, now Ghana, a nationalist. So he said, before even the British came into relations with our people, we were developed people having our own institutions, having our own ideas of government. This is African Gold Coast nationalist, the present Ghana. So a general overview. Walter Lodney writes like this. It has been shown that using comparative standards, Africa today is underdeveloped in relation to Western Europe and a few other parts of the world, and that the present position has been arrived at not by the separate evolution of Africa on the one hand and Europe on the other, but through exploitation. As well known, Africa has had prolonged and extensive contact with Europe, and one has to bear in mind that contact between different societies changes their respective rates of development. To set the record straight for operations are required. This was Walter Rodney, the Guyanese activist. So, reconstruction of the nature of development in Africa before the coming of the Europeans. Second operation was that reconstruction of the nature of development which took place in Europe before expansion abroad. Third operation is the analysis of Africa's contribution to Europe's present developed state. Fourth, analysis of Europe's contribution to Africa present underdeveloped state. So that is how Europe underdeveloped Africa. So the second task has already been extensively carried out in European literature, and only passing references need to be made, but the others are all deserving of further attention. The African continent reveals very fully the workings of the law of uneven development of societies. There are marked contrasts between the Ethiopian Empire and the hunting groups of pygmies in the Congo forest, or between the empires of the Western Sudan and the Khoisan hunter-gatherers of the Kalahari Desert. Indeed, there were striking contrasts within any given geographical area. The Ethiopian Empire embraced literate feudal Amharic noblemen as well as simple Kafra cultivators and the Gara pastoralists. The empires of the Western Sudan had sophisticated, educated Mandinga townsmen, small communities of Bozo fishermen, and the nomad Fulani herdsmen. Even among clans and lineages that appear roughly similar, there were considerable differences. However, it is possible to distinguish between what was uniquely African and what is at a given what was universal in the sense of being characteristic of all human societies at a given stage of development. It is also essential to recognize the process of dialectical evolution from lower to higher of social organization and in looking the most advanced social formations. One would appreciate the potential of the continent as whole and the direction of changes. So here we are just treating to see what were the stages of developments among the Africans before the coming of the colonialists. Mainly, this stems from the desire to make comparison with European civilization. This is not the context in which to evaluate the so-called civilization of Europe. It is enough to note the behavior of European capitalists from the epoch of slavery through colonialism, fascism, and the genocidal wars in Asia and Africa. Such, barbar- such barbarism causes suspicion to attach the use of the word civilization to describe Western Europe and North America. As far as Africa is concerned, during the period of early development, it is preferable to speak in terms of cultures rather than civilizations. A culture is a total way of life. It embraces what people ate and what they wear, they walked, and the way they talked, the manner in which they treated death and greeted the newborn. Obviously, unique features came into existence in virtually every locality with regard to all social details. So, because of the impact of colonialism and the culture imperialism, which will be discussed later, Europeans and Africans themselves in the colonial period lacked due to regard for the unique features of African culture. Those features have a value of their own that cannot be eclipsed by the European culture, either in the comparative period of 1500 AD or in the subsequent centuries. So we are just going to see stage by stage. So African dance and art were almost invariably linked with the religious world outlook. That means we want to see to show that even before the colonial period or even before the coming of the whites, there were religion, African religion. That's why I'm just treating on African philosophy and religion. And our reference will be Laurent Magesa, Dr. Laurent Magesa, and Professor John Mbiti. These will be best reference books. So African religion, African dance and the art were almost invariably linked with the religious world outlook in one way or another. As it were known, tradition, African religious practices exist in great variety, and it should also be remembered that both Islam and Christianity found homes on the African continent almost from their very inception. So Christianity and Islam found their religion, African religion. So the Africans had already known their God, and to prove that, I'm just doing the research on Buha philosophy. If you visit to my second channel of YouTube, this Liben TZ, you will see Buha philosophy. For instance, in Kigoma, Tanzania here, we had some names. For instance, we could call somebody Nyonkuru, that means you are great. Or we could call somebody Hatangimana or Havyarimana, that is God bears. Or we could call someone Niongabo, that means God is great. The same. These names are common in Burundi, Rwanda, Ngara, Tanzania, and Kigoma in particular. So, the features of the traditional African religions help to set African cultures apart from those on the other continents. But in this present context, it is more important to note how much African religion had in common with the religion elsewhere and how this can be used index to the level of development in Africa before European impact in the 15th century. That is true. What Walter Rodney is speaking or is arguing. For instance, the concept of God among the people of Rwanda, Burundi, Congo, Tanzania, and the people from nearby, Karagwe, Bunyoro, Kitara, Buganda, almost the same. So once you God, they call Katonda, they call Nyongabo, they call Rurema. That means God creates. Subscribe this channel, please. We are just looking on the development of the African continent before the coming of the Europeans. That according to the context of Walter Rodney, the historian, it seems that the coming of the Europeans in Africa crippled the development of Africa. Subscribe. This is Liberio, Tanzania, Africa. How Europe underdeveloped Africa.